chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
From all of this is that you don't have to be a mathematician to enjoy math and employ it in your life. You just simply need to look for patterns around you and then challenge yourself. Have I avoided the confirmation bias? Can I logically deduce what I'm seeing here? And if you can answer these questions in the affirmative, then perhaps you've become the genesis of an idea that changes the way all of us think. Thank you very much.
All right, welcome to our Daily Gun Show. Come to you live every weeknight at midnight Eastern, and we talk about guns for an hour. That little part there was just the end of some TED Talk about the golden ratio, actually math, that I've been listening. I was just listening to before the show, and I thought that end part was pretty cool. So I just figured I'd play it again. And with that in mind, since it kind of hit you out of nowhere, I'm gonna play it again. So this is again in context, some TED Talks I was listening to. Could you hear that though, Travis?
Yeah, it came through. It was probably not as loud as it could be, but you could definitely hear it.
Yeah, it's just, different audio. I'll put up that computer's volume a little bit, and I'm going to play it again. Just a moment.
So the takeaway from all of this is that you don't have to be a mathematician to enjoy math and employ it in your life. You just simply need to look for patterns around you and then challenge yourself. Have I avoided the confirmation bias? Can I logically deduce what I'm seeing here? And if you can answer these questions in the affirmative, then perhaps you've become the genesis of an idea that changes the way all of us think. Thank you very much.
So I think that's poignant because he's talking about basically the golden ratio, which has to do with a thing about math. Basically, it's a curve that you see in nature, the spiral of a fern or a leaf unfolding. Everybody's seen it, and it doesn't matter. But the concept is that nature is, depending on how you look at it, or I guess from your perspective, in spite of how you look at it, nature is. Let's just put it that way. And when you look at nature, taking away politics and religion and every other thing you might have as far as a confirmation or some kind of bias, when you look at nature, it's got some principles to it, some reproducible things. So, one of those is this golden rule, this ratio, and there's patterns and that kind of stuff. So anyway, I just thought that's neat because so often we get caught up, especially I just got out of Yankees chat with Matt, and that's quite focused on politics often and pop culture and, what's happening today in the United States. But in real life, we're a rock flying through the universe with a thin atmosphere around it, around a sun that keeps us hot and keeps these molten core moving, which keeps a bunch of magnetic waves from washing away our atmosphere. And we're a bunch of these, carbon-based life skimming around on the top of it for the relatively recent past here, trying to get along. And, we can either focus on what's happening right now, and we can always look at what's coming up, or, go to the extremes. But on the other hand, if we just keep an awareness of where we're at and what, perspective of what's important and what's truly useful and what's truly worth our time and everything, I think we can be a little less susceptible to being puppets. And anyway, I was just listening to this math, and it got me to thinking about news and the same way that you can predict the way that a leaf is going to unfold, or that, a leaf might unfold 10 years from now. You can really see patterns going backwards in time in politics and news and things that we're seeing today with Iran and stuff. A lot of the frustration is that as we're older, we understand that there's patterns in these things, and that this isn't the first time something like this has happened, and that country isn't a darling. And yeah, we don't need to scorn them and hate them forever, but we also never want to forget the horrible things that have happened. And anyway, so I was just thinking about how perspective can relate. So I'll shut up. Travis is the teacher, jumping in from Nebraska. Thanks for joining in. I don't know, since that had kind of to do with math, you teach science and stuff, or tech?
Spanish, but I also do computer programming and coding. But the pattern thing is definitely there when you get into a lot of your computer programming and stuff. But no, man, what you're talking about was it's nice just to kind of take it just a step back once in a while and just kind of think about life in general. And like you said, whether it's these patterns in nature or just these patterns in humanity, It's true, man. You know, we see this stuff over and over and over again, and sometimes we just don't stop to look at it and maybe try to learn from our mistakes, you know?
And I'm not saying like, oh, just sit back and drift because
No.
it's inevitable. I'm just saying like there's people that are going to try to screw us the same way they tried to screw some other people. So just be aware of some of that. And
Oh, yeah.
but anyway, it was like I say, I was just listening to this thing. It's one of the things I'll do when I'm working on what I'm working on right now, which is video. So I'm listening to something where I don't have to watch it. If it's a TED Talks, I think, and everybody knows what that is. But
Oh, yeah.
if they need to show you something, they're saying it. So you look over and you look at it. But for the most part, I'm just listening to it. And I just wanted to throw out there too that's one of the things I find most interesting about the YouTube compared to any of the other things we've had back in the day, VHS or cable or anything else, because of the whatever you call TED Talks, like that infomercial, that infotainment. Because sure, it's just fluff almost, a lot of it's theoretical or whatever, but I really like the idea of like getting spun around and looking at something from a totally different perspective or from a different angle.
Yeah, I don't know how people feel about TED Talks, but I really enjoy them, and they really remind me a lot of the keynote speakers that I hear at technology conferences that I go to, because a lot of times they just talk about kind of life and evolution and technology and things like that. But yeah, TED Talks can be a lot of fun, man. If you ever get a chance, there's a really good one you need to watch. It's pretty easy to find. It's a high-ranking military officer walks out on the stage, and he's in, I don't know if he's in Norway or Finland or Germany. It's easy to find on YouTube. It's got a lot of views. But
I found it. I know
the AR-15 one. Yeah, he comes out the AR-15 or an M4, and the crowd just like, it's all quiet. Like, what the hell? It was amazing because a lot of us wouldn't even really have second thoughts about it if we saw a presenter come out with something like that here in the US, but everybody's just like freaking out in that video. And he gives a pretty decent rational explanation for firearms ownership. But yeah, TED Talks are nice, man. You just put them on in the background and just kind of listen, and yeah, I really do enjoy them.
And that one specifically, like that guy isn't real like in your face or like shut up, being fringe. He's compassionate, I guess, in his explanation of why.
Yeah, he's speaking logically.
Without being wimpy either. He's not like, I have to, so I do, or something like that's like giving power away and saying like there's nothing we can do. Some of us have to. He's like acknowledges that it's a choice and that there's not the only choice, but it's a choice he's chose with a deliberation or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So we see Cycles out there through Himmelink. We are live. We're running it on StreamYard, the Duck tonight because they let me back in, and it's easier than the other one. The other one's kind of just a pain in the butt. So I'm in the middle of editing a video, kind of mentioned, and sent out the links here about half an hour ago. Looks like Clover didn't do a show tonight. Yankee just finished up his, and I just got back to everything, so I'm not sure if there was other shows tonight or not. Cycle is saying that was the head of NATO, so that's even more significant.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because I knew it was some kind of general or something, like say from like Norway or somewhere up in the Nordics.
Yeah, and I watched it a couple of years ago, so I mean I couldn't remember all the details specifically, but
So tonight though, I sent out the invites to people. The topics are gun museums and video editing, and that's because I'm sitting here editing a video on gun museums. So I'm going to flip over to screen share, and how do I make it there? That's the screen. So yeah, you think you're looking at two monitors? Nope, that's one monitor. That's what it's like when you have a super wide monitor. It's awesome. So I've got this Gun Channels thing up on the screen right now. I can close that, and now you're just looking at my video editing software. I didn't think anybody was going to jump in tonight, so I was just going to sit here in silence, video editing.
Edit and talk.
Yeah. No, I don't even talk. I don't like.
Oh yeah,
just work on it. Some of you guys can do like live chats and just chat.
Yeah,
I chat too much. I chat. People invite me to chats. I talk all the time, so I don't have like the, I don't care about the chatting part. So unless there's somebody to join the DGS, I just, I was just going to sit here and wait. But anyway, you joined in. So instead, I was just going to say, so I've started editing this video. My idea was to make, about a 5-minute video. And so it didn't get too long because I don't know if I have that much stuff to say, but I wanted to introduce a series of videos on firearms museums. So obviously I'm a big fan of the firearms museums, and now I've visited quite a few of them. In fact, there's just a couple that I haven't. So I wanted to, now that I got the new computer, use the software that I've got to do something with all the footage that I've created or collected, right? So I
Yeah.
sat down and I got a little intro going, and then basically started jumping to my, do I have anything open over here? I don't know, but I started jumping through my hard drives and just grabbing pictures from different museums or what. And now I'm also using one of my websites over here, the Gun Shop Guide. I have kind of the online list of all the museums I visited. So I'll open one up and grab the information from it, like when it was made and that kind of stuff. And I've been using that over here and notes on this other monitor. And then adding this little piece here is this block. So like this one was founded in 1955 and blah, blah, blah. And then a couple of pictures. And then I'm trying to put them in here chronologically. So it'll start with, it turns out Wool Rock in Tulsa was the first one in 1929. A couple of pictures. And then the next one is the NRA headquarters when it was first established in 1935. Looks like the second one, and so forth. So I've been collecting the pictures and putting them in and trying to assemble them here. This thing's taking me like 2 freaking days of doing this. Like I thought, oh, 5-minute video. I'll just put this together real quick. And then
So I got a quick question for you. On all these museums you visit, because I've got 2 here in town, and I want to make recommendations to you to check them out at some point. What do they restrict your photography at all when you go into any of these places, or
It's
do
a
they have
good
like
question.
no flash photography? Because I'm kind of curious what you need to take to go into this. You just want to just use your cell phone, or what?
Yeah, it's a good question. So me
Yeah.
personally, I just use my cell phone because I just don't have anything else. I
Yeah.
just don't have anything else. So it depends on the museum. So is the actual answer. Like you say, photography can be a thing. I know there's one, Fort Huachuca down here has is one of the old forts from the Indian Wars and from the old days. So they had to make forts every so often, and for the horses they can only go so far, and especially through the desert. And this is one of the ones that survived. So as you can imagine, as those forts started to close down, they would consolidate all their stuff, to the remaining forts. So this is one of the old forts that's got all the stuff. So it's literally just, it has to be the museum. It's got all the old stuff. And the old stuff is made out of wood and leather and cotton, basically, is all going to disappear under UV at some point. So that museum is dark. And I've had discussions with people, they have to do it that way. Otherwise, the stuff literally disappears. But yeah, it's horrible for taking pictures or trying to, and they definitely don't want flash photography in there. That's an extreme because the stuff was worn out when they accumulated it and it wasn't taken care of for a long, long time. Now, if you go to the Smithsonian, where like somebody painted something significant and immediately went to the Smithsonian, it's been taken care of, like archival since the beginning, like the Constitution or something. I'm sure that stuff's going to last forever and you can take a picture of it. But so I think it kind of depends. And that's something that is just, at least in my experience, and I've seen, again, not all of the little museums, but I've seen a lot of them now. None of them have said no pictures, except for the Cowboy Museum. Didn't want you taking pictures of their art because they have some guns there, but it's really a like whatever museum, and art is a big chunk of it, and they just don't want you taking pictures of the art. And I guess that's more of like, they don't want somebody taking a picture and making a poster of it, probably.
Yeah.
Or just never going back to the museum. I don't know why they would do it anymore. But anyway, that's the only one that's really said anything about pictures. And then as far as stuff, I think some of them have said, like, in fact, some of them do say, no professionals, like, let us know if you want to do something professional. And I think they don't want you making a book, going in there one afternoon and taking a picture of literally everything, which I have done before. But if I made a book and said, hey, don't bother going to the museum, instead buy my book, they'd probably not be happy about that.
Oh, I understand that. Yeah.
But otherwise, no, I haven't had too much problem.
Cool.
Now you're talking about the museums in Nebraska. I've heard about the trapping one. Is that one of them?
Well, no, the one where I live in Lexington, Nebraska, and we've got a really nice one called the Heartland Museum of Military Vehicles.
Oh, okay.
And then they also have a lot more stuff inside, but they kind of changed the displays inside. It is a free will offering to come tour it. It doesn't cost anything unless you want to donate something. You can. It's staffed by volunteers and veterans. It gets 4.7 out of 5 stars on 207 Google reviews, which I think is pretty solid. And they've got really decent. The website is very, very simple, but they have a decent photo gallery, so you really get a good idea as to what they have, in their inventory. What I like about it is they do actually use the vehicles in parades and stuff. So yeah, if you go into maybe gallery, there's a place you can click on that's going to let you see what they have for vehicles and stuff. I think you have to click on one of the links.
So in other
And
words,
then,
instead of just being static, they're kept up. And they
oh
use-
yeah, they run. You use them in the Veterans Day parade. They use them in various parades that they have in town and stuff, and it's pretty cool, man. But yeah, just to have like something like that in a little town of 10,000 right off the interstate is really cool. And some of the they got a bunch of vehicles sitting out front too, and you can like go climb up on them and stuff if you want to. And they do have some static vehicles out front too, some tanks and things like that.
I think I drove right past it because
Yeah,
I
you
drove
did,
out.
yeah.
I drove out of Colorado from Denver, heading towards Chicago. Is that I don't know what that road is.
Yeah, you had Interstate 80. You had contacted me when you were about 80 miles east of where I was at because I was in school, and you're like, "Hey, man, you wanna do some lunch or something?" I'm like, "Well, I'm a little ways away." But if you ever go by this route, or if anybody listening ever goes, again, the Lexington exit, you got to call ahead and just make sure they're open because the hours are pretty well fixed. Looks like it's 10 a.m. to 10 to 4. So they're open in the afternoons for 6 hours, but that's just mainly because it's staffed by volunteers. But no, that's the.
Is
No,
it
I'm
right
sorry.
off
That's,
is it right off the highway? And there's like signs on the highway.
yeah, you can see. Yeah, you take a right, and there's a sign right there that says Heartland Museum of Military Vehicles. And you take the exit and go north into Lexington. It's right there.
Yeah,
First
see, I
right.
think I drove past it, and you know what it is when you're driving down the highway, especially because I'm down here by 60 Route 66 so often. It's
Mhm.
all about like billboards for check us out, it's the best exit ever. You got to check out this exit; it's the best exit ever. And
Yeah.
I was thinking it was one of those. You can't. I
Oh,
wasn't
yeah,
aware that
yeah.
it was like an actual thing. I figured I'd turn off and it'd be like a gas station with a military theme or something.
Oh no, it's an actual full. Yeah, it's got
Yeah.
a full-on building and
But I
everything. So
also think
Yeah.
I was leaving in the middle of the night from Denver, and like you say, I got past you because, and by the time I called you, it was like 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. Like I
Yeah,
was past
yeah.
this place at like 8 a.m. I think, so I would have
Yeah.
had to wait for them to open, I think, or something, even if I would have known about them. But it's really not that far. Then you're not. I mean, it's hours out of Denver. I would say you could almost hit this from Denver. No.
Oh yeah, we're about 4.5 hours east of Denver.
So
So a
this
lot of
museum-
people stop up here and check it out on the way through and stuff. Yeah. So we got that one, and then the other one I want to recommend is the Dawson County Historical Society Museum. That's another one here that we have here in town, and they've got quite a few firearms, surprisingly, from various wars that people have donated. And I need to get some pictures of them because I don't know exactly what the inventory is, but they have many cases of military like paraphernalia, uniforms, accessories that soldiers carried, firearms, all that. And that's a really cool one. So Dawson County Historical Society, that's also free too. There's no cost on that one to go check it out. They're open 5 days a week. The Heartland Military Museum that has the vehicles is actually open 7 days a week. So
No,
Yeah.
You're without getting too personal. You're not going to be there forever. So
No.
have you been to this one before? Have you done a review or anything?
Yeah, I have not reviewed it. I don't know if I can. I need to ask them, but I've been to that one several times. Actually, our kids volunteer to do cleanup on the grounds around the area and the park right next door. So then we've gone in there before and helped them with cleaning and some upkeep and stuff. And yeah, they're both wonderful museums. And the Heartland one I've only been to it once, but that's another one that I really need to get that documented before I move. But
Right
Yeah.
on. That's all I was going to say. And then that's the other thing is that, driving around and looking at museums has been awesome, and it is awesome. I hope to keep doing it. But, there's no way to see everything, especially when you get to stuff like this, the Historical Society Museum,
Yeah.
because that's
Oh, it's
something
huge,
where
man.
it might
Yeah.
not be on anybody's radar yet. But if an individual going into a place with their mom or their wife or whoever, daughter, and they're looking at this stuff, and they notice it and they take some pictures and add it to the conversation, then that's where the beauty of the internet works, right? Now all of a
Oh,
sudden,
yeah.
places that have been hidden are known, and now if you're driving through that neck of the woods, you can go give them well, it's free, but everybody who goes to a museum knows that you're gonna leave a couple of bucks as a thank you.
oh yeah, yeah.
You leave them a couple of bucks and you go, thank you. I heard about your gun collection. That was awesome. And that
Yeah.
volunteer who's sitting there, that's feedback. And they're going to go, oh, maybe we should, pay more attention to the gun museum or whatever. That's somebody else that came in for the gun museum.
Mhm.
Is he
Oh, that's-
content there? You want a link, John? I didn't know if you're up or not.
It's kind of fun. They got a couple one-room schoolhouses out front that you can go into also.
That's actually
Pot
gotta be
belly
pretty
stove right in the middle of it and stuff. Yeah, it's a nice building. Again, small town, but just something really neat. And a lot of people have donated a lot of items because our county's been around for a very, very long time.
Now, speaking of being around for a long time, Cycle jumped in. You're older than some of the audience out there. I've been around for a while, and I think we've all road tripped a little bit. Have you guys ever found a little one-room schoolhouse that, back in I want to say pretty much all growing up until just recently, that kind of thing would have just been sitting there without even a fence around it half the time. Maybe recently with the litigious stuff, they'd start putting fences around things. But have you guys ever just checked out like an old abandoned one-room schoolhouse and just, we're talking about the
No, they have a preserved one in Vermont that my family is very familiar with.
Well, I've seen those, I guess. There was one I saw in Wyoming that they just basically didn't ruin it. Like they kept it around, and I don't know if it wasn't really a museum. It was almost like a rest area on the side of the road, but because everyone respected it, it was just in good shape. No vandalism or anything, and it was almost a museum, but it was also no doors or nothing, if I remember right. It was just there. But I'm thinking more like the abandoned one, where they're just, because when we went from one-room schoolhouses to schools, I guess, those things, nobody bought them. The government owned them, I guess. They just left them be. And
Yeah, Nebraska has 20 of
I've
them.
seen them all over.
Yeah, I almost bought a school a couple of years ago.
Dude, that'd have been sweet, man.
Yeah, we were looking for a like a fixer upper kind of thing, and there was this small school in town that it would have been perfect, man. We could have put a bunch of false walls in it and had like 20 rooms. It would have been great, but there was issues with septic and all that kind of stuff, so we decided to take a pass.
That's why I asked.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was going to buy one in a little town out here on about halfway between Tucson and Tombstone, and it was same thing. The house was so old, there's no plumbing or nothing. It's just a big building. It's just like there's electric, but there's hardly nothing else. It was always just a big room.
Yeah, the one in Vermont was kids actually had to bring wood with them in the winter. That was part of the school fee to feed the stove. So I thought that was pretty cool. And this was not. It's not like a lot of them they'll like have like chains or ropes and say you can't go in. This was like just a school. You walk in, that the teachers area was like it always was. It's kind of like what you said. It wasn't, people didn't screw around with it, so they just left it open. It was really neat.
It was like an experiential museum or whatever they call it now, where like they expect you to sit down and what.
Yeah, I just looked it up, and apparently Nebraska has 20 of them. And it looks like about half of them have been kept up, and the other half have not. They're either made out of like brick or stone, and we still have some sod ones too. I don't know if how much of those are still left, but yeah, that's pretty crazy, man.
All right, so you didn't get the link or the email with the links, but video editing, gun museums are the topics tonight. I don't know if Cycle Camp wants to throw something in specifically on those. We put out there in the chat earlier something about like medical gear used in wartime is pretty interesting. I agree with you, but are you thinking Civil War time? Are you thinking like World War II? I don't think you're thinking modern. Oh
no, any war. It's the advances in medical technology parallel the advances in firearms technology. And it was very interesting when I was in Norway, and I went to one of the war museums in Norway. They actually had a whole part of that building dedicated, because believe it or not, the Norwegians, while they didn't, they didn't instigate a lot of wars and stuff, but they frequently went with NATO. And a lot of the things they did was provide medical assistance and stuff like that. So they had really interesting, like you could see helicopters that had been modified for evac. They had older stuff from like World War II and the Korean conflict, because basically if there was any kind of war anywhere that NATO was involved with, the Norwegians were there. And it was really cool. I mean, they had the stuff from the crudest, here's a saw and we just cut their limbs off, right to, okay, here's a machine that we used for like clearing people's lungs and stuff like that. It was I find that stuff, I'm interested in all kinds of technology, not just firearms and stuff, and some of that medical stuff is pretty cool.
Yeah, and then how do you say, like in regular medical, I'm assuming things like you have to wait for a case to happen, and then you have to be the kind of doctor who's willing to improvise and not be satisfied or something, and then it's got to be validated and everything. There's like a pace to it. But in an emergency situation, war hospitals and stuff, that's where you see things. This guy's going to die one way or the other. Like, will this piece of plastic jabbed in here do something? Nope. Nope. Yep. It did that way. It did that way. Now we're saving people's lives and we learned something new.
Yeah, field expedient medicine, emergency and trauma room procedures. A lot of that comes right off the battlefield.
Like, how different would MASH have been? Like, how nowadays? Okay, I don't know, I guess, but I know that like Quincy or something back in the day was all about the mystery side of it. It was like Agatha Christie or something, but he was a medical guy. But like, there's also doctor shows that are there doctor shows that get into the tech of like the actual nuts and bolts of the doctoring? Because something like MASH that got into the nuts and bolts of how the technology adapted instead of the like, when Alan Alda took over and it turned into like a psychological drama or whatever. But if it would have just stuck with the innovation of tech through the Korean War, I mean, not just in general, but in the Korean War specifically, like I bet you that was like a focused fast forward of tech because we could, just so much other tech was developing, electronic tech, metal tech, plastics.
Well, just think nowadays of the portable X-ray. I mean, now they, instead of dragging a guy off to the X-ray room, now they just, if it's critical, if it's a crisis, they just grab the portable X-ray machine and wheel it right in. I'm a big fan of Grey's Anatomy, and I love the fact that the guy that runs the trauma is an ex-vet. I mean, he was a trauma surgeon in the military, and a few times they've had him in crisis situations, whether it be a traffic accident that it came upon or that kind of stuff, where you can see. I mean, obviously it's an actor and everything, but you can see that the whoever's advising the producers of the show really does a good job on stuff like that. It just makes a lot of sense, and it's stuff that you hear about. I recently worked a road race as part of the ham radio hobby that I got started in, and one of the things we did was we had to take a stop the bleeding class, and it was very basic, but it all made sense. And a lot of it was based on what they found out, from people getting, shot and stuff on the battlefield. And because most people die like from gunshot wounds, most people don't die from the actual gunshot itself. They die because they bleed out, exsanguination. And a lot of times it's just a question of, man, if you've got a roll of gauze, you just jam it in there. You've just like tripled their chances of surviving.
Right. So in other words, let me play for host and interrupt you because that's critical. Not only is it not inevitable that you'll bleed out. So you're saying it's not that people die from the bullet. They die from the blood loss. And it's not that it's inevitable that when you get shot, you're going to die from the blood loss, because they're dying not from the blood loss, but actually from the lack of awareness in them or the people around them on how to stop the blood loss. But now you remove the bullet and all the connotation and the violence and the politics, and you just say somebody gets jabbed and they're bleeding. They don't get jabbed from getting jabbed. I mean, people don't die from getting jabbed very often. Unless you happen to get jabbed in a couple of points in your body that are pretty small, you don't just turn your lights off. You get jabbed and then you pull that thing out and now you start losing blood. And you don't die from the loss of blood. You die because a bunch of people don't know how to stop that loss of blood. But you're right. It's very easy because we're designed to not die. Like, everything about us is designed to keep us from dying. You just have to help that along a little bit and not mess with it, not mess with our system. And you can prevent a lot of the problems. So I just wanted to interrupt there. That's a brilliant point.
No, and to expound that out even further, the recent church shooting. I don't know if you saw the video where the professional kind of did a blow by blow. Here's what happened. Here's what was good. Here's what was bad. And one of the things he said was, the shooting, the guys that stopped the shooting, they did a great job. But where was the emergency trauma people? one of the defenders, he was pretty much gone. There were really much they could do about him, but they strongly suspect they could have saved one of the two guys if someone had been there to stop the bleeding. And that was one of the things that they said was, don't, if you're going to have a group of guys like in your church or in your Rotary Club or whatever that are responsible for containing a threat like that, make sure you've got people who are also trained in how to patch people up in a real hurry to stop them from bleeding out. And I thought that was a very good point they made in the particular video. One of the guys in my CCDL group passed that video around, and I thought the guy made a really good point. It's not enough to have people that are there to shoot. You also have to have people there to say, attend to the wounded, because you've only got 2-3 minutes tops in a lot of cases before people bleed out enough. If it's a real bad, if it's like an artery, it's more like seconds than minutes. But if it's if it's venous bleeding and you can stop it, it only takes a couple minutes for them to bleed out, and you need people who can do that kind of stuff. So I think it's very interesting, and of course a lot of the people that carry they carry kits with them and stuff. I don't carry one on my person. I do keep one in the car, and even that's not such a good thing, because by the time you run to the car and get it and run back, you're probably pretty much out of luck. But how much does a packet of gauze weigh? If you wrap it flat, you could stick it in a back pocket, have it with you all the time.
So unless Travis wants to throw something in, Cycle, you just took the class recently. I'm a super big fan of it for way more reasons than one. Can you, unless again Travis wants to jump in here?
No, yeah, I was just going to say that, for every little bit of training that we do, whether we're security detail or as individuals, you need to back it up with some sort of almost like EMT or trauma training. Learn how to use it, what quad is, understand how gauze works and advantages. And
I'm okay with
yeah.
I agree with you on the concept, but I mean, I don't think it's necessary. I am an EMT. At least I'm a retired EMT, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
I went through school and I got nationally registered. Right, I never worked as one, but I've done stuff occasionally, and I'm confident enough to say I'm a retired EMT, right? But not like what do you call it, like a veteran EMT or nothing. But I can 100% say you don't need EMT training, and I don't want to even advocate it. If you want to, go for it. It's an easy thing to pursue. It's one semester, it's 6 months in school, and you can get confident in all kinds of stuff that you'll never need, like helping birth a baby, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, but I was going to say, Cycle, if you don't mind, if you're willing, summarize the Stop the Bleed, because if I understand it correctly, it's like an hour class. It's not like, in other words, I think with just some simple stuff, it's like preventing forest fires. You don't need to know how to be a fire department guy or a firefighter to know how to not start fires, right? So I think Stop the Bleed is ideal because it's like CPR was. It takes a bunch of stuff that people think you need to be a doctor or some kind of paramedic to deal with, and reminds people that nope, we all know what bleeding is. There's just severe bleeding and not severe bleeding. But if you would, Cycle, do you want to try to? Is it possible to summarize it?
Yeah, you're right. It was about a 45-minute class, and they taught you two things. They taught you how to pack a wound, and they taught you how to use a tourniquet. And they didn't talk about like clotting factors and stuff like that. Basically, it was just to get people to realize just how deep some of these wounds are. And, how to, they had a couple different mechanisms for taking a piece of straight rolled gauze, like about a 2-inch roll of gauze. And, with one stab or shot type wound, you're talking a whole roll to pack that thing. I mean, it was amazing to me how tough it was to do that, because they had like mannequins, and stuff that had like bullet holes and stuff in them that you had to pack. But they also showed you tourniquets, and they basically said, don't, tourniquets are, the important things are like, don't ever put a tourniquet on a joint. You've always got to be above it or below it. And don't try to, there are certain things in the main abdomen area. You might pack a wound in the main abdomen area, but it's because it's so spacious in there, it's very, very difficult to stop bleeding in that particular area. So most of the time, you're going for the extremities. You're trying to straighten out people that might have holes in their arms or legs or that kind of thing. Now, not that you can't, apply a compression, bandage to a chest wound or that kind of thing. But it really was just the basics of, remembering that sometimes it's a through and you got to look in the back, actually identifying where the blood is actually coming from, not being afraid to cut away clothing and stuff like that to make sure you've covered where the bleeding really is. It's a very basic course, but I thought it was very useful. My only critique of the course was, after they got done with the course, they should have made some of those things available. They should have bought like a box of 50 cats, tourniquets, and made them available if people wanted to buy them. Because I think that would have been very useful. Because now, so I take the course, and then it's like, well, when I did do the road race, I made sure to bring 2-3 rolls of gauze with me just in case. But there's no way, because I took the course like 2 days before the road race. There's no way I could have got a cat delivered in that amount of time. So I thought it would have been really nice if they'd have done that. But I thought it was a very useful. It was a very basic. You can't save everybody, but some things are pretty easy. And they stress the fact that this is incredibly painful for the person that you're working on. People think about tourniquets and they say, not a big deal. Well, as part of the course, they had us put tourniquets on each other. And I'm telling you, to get it to the point where it stopped bleeding, you would really have to crank the shit out of that thing, and it's going to hurt. People are going to be screaming and whining and moaning about that. And you have to be prepared for stuff like that. So I thought it was a very interesting course, very good. I still think I would like to take I really need to re-up my CPR cert. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be afraid to dance on somebody's chest now that they got rid of the breathing requirement. And that's another thing that's interesting is we talked about technology and stuff. I mean, they have totally changed their thought about rescue breathing and stuff like that. They don't want you breathing people at all. Now they're saying that the amount of bouncing up and down you do on their chest to keep the heart going is enough to keep the lungs going. And you don't need to do the, three sets of 5 and then go breathe twice and then come back and do 3 sets of 5. That shit's all off the table now. And that was pretty interesting. And the other thing was to make sure you had gloves with you, a set of nitrile gloves or something, so that, you can protect yourself from other people's blood. And so I thought it was a very good course. Like you said, it was only 45 minutes to an hour, but it was also at the end of 40 minutes or so, it was hands-on, come over and pack a wound, come over and put on a tourniquet and see what it's like, for our particular style of tourniquet they were using. It was pretty cool.
Right on.
And I agree with Guitar Man Pete. If you can stop the bleeding just by using direct pressure, that's the best. But if you can't do that, then that's what the tourniquet's for. So I definitely agree with that. And they talk about that. They talk about, but they also talked about the fact that, I was always taught as a kid, growing up, that tourniquets were like, you throw a tourniquet on, you kiss that limb goodbye. Well, with the advantages of surgery they have nowadays, their whole thing is, man, throw that tourniquet on there. We'll take care of that when we get them back to the hospital. We'll take care of whatever crushed arteries he's got or any of that kind of stuff. Keep it going. So the important thing is to keep the blood from all coming out, because he's going to need all he's got. And that's pretty much it.
Right on. So I just figured I'd jump into some of the stuff you talked about jargon-wise or whatever. So gauze, at first I was on the rolls of gauze. I guess there's rolls right there. Everybody knows, we assume everybody knows what a roll of gauze is, but you can go to like Walgreens and pay $4 for like a single or maybe 2 rolls of gauze that they package in like a sterile little thing, like little clear plastic things. You feel like you're in an emergency room or something. And, that's made to give either somebody to calm down or somebody who's like oversensitive and needs to, feel like they're getting emergency room treatment. Or you can get them in the pieces of paper and they're a little cheaper. So, if this is going to be used for a science project or to plaster a cast, it doesn't need to be sterile anymore. So you can get it just wrapped in paper. And if it's not sterile, it's probably a little cheaper. Of course, you can buy everything in bulk, buy stuff online. It's even cheaper still. I like the sterile plastic because it's in plastic and it keeps it clean. For the most part, it's probably going to be clean when you go to use it, which is always nice, but not necessary. And then the other negative on it when you've got this kind of stuff is that it's got like a little balloon there, so it'll pop. At least out here where we have elevation, that's an issue for us. Or just putting it in a pack and you want it to be compact. If it's got air in it, you're going to have to pop it in order to get it compact. So that could be an issue for some of the sterile stuff. But the other thing, I was jumping over to the Z pack because, like Cycle just said, most of the time gauze was used differently up until recently. And I think, again, not through battlefield knowledge, because they knew about it a long time ago, but the facilitation of getting data from experts or, surgeons basically, or emergency room surgeons out to the real world, that's democratized. That information is out there. It's not like secret or just unknown. So anyway, putting gauze into a they call it a Z fold, where it's just folded back and forth in a stack instead of in a circle, makes it easier to deal with in real life. So you open that vacuum sealed sterile pack. So now it's still vacuum, or it's sterile, but vacuum packed. So you don't have to worry about the bubble. And when it's vacuum packed, it's going to be least likely to break, like open the packaging or whatever, because there's no pressure from the inside inducing any of that. It's also sometimes packed like this so that it can be, like you said, just put in your pocket, and it's a dark package, so you don't have to worry about a big white thing if you're hunting or if you're in a tactical situation or something. But the folded pattern of packing it makes it much more easier to apply and administer the way that Cycle's talking about for packing a wound, because what you're really trying to do is facilitate capillary action. You're facilitating the what's that word? The coagulation of blood.
Yeah, the clotting factor. Yeah.
Our goal isn't to keep the place clean or to keep the blood from pouring out. Our goal is really to facilitate, let our body do what it wants to do. And if you cut a big enough vein open and there's blood flowing through it, it's just really difficult to coagulate. So you facilitate that by nipping the end, just like if you had a straw and you were trying to get a bunch of fluid from one place to another with just a straw, you'd have to pinch the end. That's what we're trying to do with gauze, is pinch the end of all those blood things, arteries or veins, and then apply pressure so that it stays pinched. And wadding it up in there is the way to do it. And just shoving this in there like stuffing a plug wouldn't do the same thing as cramming it in there. Anyway, so these Z packs are not that expensive. This one happens to be super expensive, but here's two of them by North American Arms for $9, and that's in a nice heavy duty Mylar vacuum pack thing, and that's still going to be fairly expensive. You can find them all over cheap. So I figured I'd just throw that out there, that when we're talking gauze, you can get this fancy stuff. Here's a nice one. Here's probably the best one. H&H is a super valid company. $6, $7 for a really fancy one for flat compressed. But then there's nothing stopping you from getting something like this, a $24 pack of 48 rolls, and having those everywhere, in the van, in your backpack, in the closet, in the boat, in the vehicle, everywhere. Gauze, you can use it for tying stuff down. You can, I got a bad shoulder. You can make what do they call it? Just a shoulder. What do they call that? You take a triangle bandage and a sling. You can make a sling out of it if you had to. You could use it as compression like it's for, or just all kinds of things. So it's super useful and it's not expensive. And that's one other reason I like the Stop the Bleed classes, because they're approachable. People are willing to do it because they're kind of mandatory. People are taking them. And that's just like CPR. No one was probably going to just start doing CPR until places started making you do it. The employee occupations made you start doing it. Once people started doing it, they would go to their friends that evening and say, oh yeah, that CPR class wasn't that bad. I feel much more confident. I'm glad I've taken it. And guess what? More people take it. So I think once people start getting the word out about Stop the Bleed, don't you think? Like, it'll be something people seek out, and and are grateful for that knowledge, right, or that skill set.
Now, is Stop the Bleed the name of the course? Is it like a copyrighted program that's out there, or is it just that type of trauma class or that type of injury class that you take?
Great question. I believe it's sort of like Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It's sort of like
Okay.
a concept that nobody owns, but let me double check.
Okay.
It's sort of I think it's from top down, right? It started somewhere and it's like at a national level, but I believe it's designed to be a like nobody owns it. It's just a quick curriculum and for everybody. But let's find out. Learn more.
Yeah, it seemed like they were working off a pretty common script. I mean, they had a set of PowerPoint slides and stuff that that everybody seemed to be using. So I think Stop the Bleed is kind of a generic course that gets passed around to a lot of other people. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
It says the Stop the Bleed. That's exactly what I've understand it too. The Stop the Bleed campaign was initiated by a federal interagency work group convened by the National Security Council staff, the White House. So I guess at some point, I don't know who, it would have been Obama because it wasn't this guy. It's been around before this, I believe. The purpose of the campaign is to build a national resilience by better preparing the public to save lives by raising awareness of basic actions to stop life-threatening bleeding following everyday emergencies and man-made national disasters. Advances made by military medicine and research in hemorrhage control during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq have informed the work of this initiative, which exemplifies translation of knowledge back to the homeland to benefit the general public. The Department of Defense owns the Stop the Bleed logo and phrase, trademark branding. So I guess it's the Department of Defense. What would you call this? Like a
emergency training, I suppose, or like.
Oh no, I was going to call it
training.
like a public relations type
Oh.
of thing, maybe. Like, hey, remember like Tang? Like, hey, don't hate NASA. You got Tang. Don't
Yeah,
hate
exactly. Yeah.
NASA. It's like, don't hate the government. Like, these wars suck. Here's the thing. I'm joking, but I'm not. I understand. We either go to war with like the 82nd Airborne, right, where we send in troops, with like the Marines and like Navy battleships and stuff. Like, we go to war, or we go do things and like enable, somebody who's resisting, or we, give some resources to somebody, or we build something, we send in a couple of CBs and some guys to guard them. So we either go in mass or we go in small unit tactics. And we've been doing small unit tactics for a long time. And that means instead of getting like ordnance dropped on people, bullets are hurting people. And when that happens and you don't have extrication, helicopters pulling you right back out like we did in Vietnam and stuff. I mean, even then it wasn't like always a given. Anyway, we've got, different tactics mean different kind of results, and we are learning a lot of different things. In the same way we got Tang and the microwave when we got the, that tech from the aliens, we're getting tech from these wars that they want to make sure that we know that this tech isn't just coming out of nowhere. Nobody sat down and said, hey, let's worry about this. Instead, the Department of Defense figured all this stuff out. So I'm okay with the Department of Defense doing some PR, but it's also, remember, it's PR. It's not like we said, hey, Department of Defense, go figure out how to be better blood stoppers. We kind of want them to poke blood. Make blood. But anyway, I think most people have, no matter where it comes from, I don't think anybody ever, this is the first time I dug into it this deep either. Most people just accept it as a non-biased sort of quick. And it's not even like anti-gun. That's the thing I like about it too. It's not like, oh, worry about shooters. Remember, because shooters are so bad. Remember shooters and how guns are so bad? You should learn how to stop bleeding. It's not even like that. It's just, hey, remember how we all can bleed and die real quick? And we already do CPR for the idea that if we stop our heart or if we stop breathing, that's kind of important too. The other thing that we could do to die is bleed. So it's sort of like adding bleed to the CPR, which has always just been about airway and heartbeat.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that they have that program. It's something to really look into. I'd even suggested to our own administration at the school where I teach that we look into getting, tourniquets at a minimum, tourniquets and gauze, and offer some sort of bleeding training for the teachers that want to take it. I think it'd be pretty valuable information.
Mm-hmm.
And even bit of any kind of a shooter. I'm not saying we got to turn into EMTs, but like you said, just you can save a life if you can stop the bleeding.
Oh, way more often a broken piece of glass, like a rock.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Than a piece of glass, because even that safety glass, if a kid gets hurt and they're bleeding, and then the other thing is, I mean, bleeding is pretty basic. You got to be kind of dumb to not know to put direct pressure on bleeding. We all get paper cuts, and we know that it goes away faster when we pinch it. So you probably figure, oh, if I got blood gushing out of my mom, I'm going to hold my hand on there. Like, you're not going to just watch somebody bleed out for the most part.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the other thing that's good about these, and Psycho brought it up, is the blood is pretty gross. So, and you can walk up to somebody who's like, oh, and you're like, oh, we got a bad stomach. Like, did you fall over? And you go touch them and you move them, and now you got an arterial blood thing squirting in your eye and your mouth. Like, knowing what to do about that and not to just jam your eyes and mouth into things when you go to flip somebody over, that awareness will be big too. Like, from, especially when we're talking about going up to somebody who's not breathing. One of the reasons you don't blow in their mouth is because we don't want to transmit stuff out of their gross mouth, especially if it's like a bum or something. You know, somebody
Yeah.
you don't know, like, oh, this guy's gross, or this lady looks disgusting. I don't know what she's just been doing, but I'm not, you know, I really want her to live, but not as bad as I want to not put my mouth on that. So they figured out, okay, you're not going to, that many people aren't going to slip through the cracks here if we don't ask people to do that. And think of how many more people are willing to do CPR now that the whole mouth thing's not even on the table. So it's the same kind of thing with the blood. Like, I think the stop the blood is good because it doesn't just get randomly or unresponsibly sending people into blood situations, because it does gives you that hour to remember. We're going to be talking about blood. Blood's a really easy way to transmit stuff through humans, and there's all kinds of gross stuff, and people can travel all over the world and get gross stuff in them all different kinds of ways. So you can simply put on some gloves and like not go at it with your mouth open, you know, be ready to close your eyes, put on, you know, something over your eyes if you can. Just some simple stuff like that. It's just awareness, I guess, what I'm getting at.
Well, another thing, from a self-defense
Good
Second
stuff, man.
Amendment
Good
thing
stuff.
is, you know, if you shoot somebody and then, you know, you make your 911 call and say we need help, and then you immediately try to render stop the bleeding aid to them, that goes a long way in court to the fact that you weren't just trying to shoot somebody to kill them dead, you know.
I guess that could be debatable both ways, but yeah, certainly any human that is aware of something can, and there's a million ways to deal with that too. You're not suggesting somebody reholsters and goes over to the guy and starts dealing with them with their gun right there. I mean, you're talking tactically and warily or whatever, but ethically as well.
Yeah, we're also thinking of doing that. We're thinking of increasing the use of our range and getting range safety officer training for more of our members, you know, so if they want to act as range safety officers. But one of the things that was suggested is, hey, we also need to take, you know, basic first aid and stop the bleed training. And I thought that was a great idea because, you know, let's face it, you know, accidental shootings still happen occasionally, and it's good if you know what to do.
Oh, heck, somebody with a grant who's never dealt with one might have a bleed on their finger that requires something, you know, something applied before they can get to wherever. But steel, I mean, think how jagged some shut up steel can be. Somebody has a big piece of rifle steel fall on them accidentally somehow weird. Like, that could be horrible.
Some sort of a ricochet situation too at the range.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten copper in knee before. Other guys who have shot with have gotten, you know, the jackets ricochet just all over where you'd think you'd be completely, you know, far enough away that there'd be no velocity or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So get back into tourniquets. That's one that I think a lot of people dig into or shy away from because it sounds like a big deal. But Psycho made a valid point there, an important point that that's one of the things I don't talk about first aid too much, because there's a lot of opinion and then there's a lot of whatever. There's a lot of options, I guess. So there's a lot of reason to have a lot of opinions. It's not like there's only two ways to do it and there's right or wrong, right? There's a lot of ways to do it because there's a lot of things to do and a lot of circumstances and people approach it. So what frustrates me more than anything is the people that do think that there's an answer or solution to first aid type of problems. And there's the people that when they talk about tourniquets, well, again, I think most people probably think of tourniquets, and because there's how to use them, when to use them issues, and then which one to use issues, and then probably more than that. But just for those first two issues is usually when I see people's eyes, glaze over and they start thinking about something else. So just quickly, I guess with tourniquets, there are a bunch of brands of them, and I just want to throw out there. You were talking about, did you say CAT, or did you mention a brand?
I think that CAT, that's Cycle Camp. That's what you said, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I believe it was a CAT type current tourniquet. It was the one that has the internal piece of fabric that when you twist the little that looks like it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's
a tourniquet's job is to stop bleeding, right, on an extremity, on a limb. So without getting all into it, you'd need to tighten something around your limb, right? And you can do that with a piece of cord, or you could do that with like a seat belt, and they're both going to work differently. Now, if you go to get blood or something, they're going to use a piece of hose. So you might think, oh, a seat belt would work just fine, or a piece of 550 cord will work just fine. It'll work, but it'll damage you. Like, it's not ideal. When they do it for stopping blood, for doing like blood or something into your vein, like at a doctor's office, they only know they're going to have that on there for moments, so they don't, and it's quicker. But in real life, if you're going to be in any kind of medical situation, they'd rather use the seat belt to compress it, because it's not going to do as much damage to the meat in our stuff, our infrastructure. So that's why these type, I believe, are the way to go. However, the problem is they're huge, but there's different models, and I don't want to get too crazy with them. And again, I'm a big fan of CATs also. I personally think this is the way to go, but there are as many brands as I scroll down here. This is a Rats. So one of them, and they're all named after whoever came up with them, like whoever innovated the thing that makes them unique is usually what they're named after, or maybe some like version of the complicated name that describes what they're doing. So there's the CAT is the kind of like Cycle just said. A Rats is basically a Russian big fabric rubber band. It's like a giant piece of 550 cord with a little piece of metal, and it's decent. It's not bad. I would say this is my second favorite almost. And then there's so many other brands. I won't get into them all, but there are definitely different brands. And like anything, they get trends and fads, and they come and go, and people think they're the bee's knees. One of the things I like about the CATs is that you can apply it to yourself very easily compared to most other tourniquets. Not very easily, but easily compared to other tourniquets. And if you are by yourself and you realize you need a tourniquet, that's not when I want to learn how to apply a tourniquet to myself. But what I'm looking for, and I don't see it on here, is the SWAT. And that's what I really wanted to get into. Realizing there's a whole bunch of them out there. Did they talk about the SWAT at all, Cycle?
No, they basically, like you said, they said the CAT was the easiest one to learn to put on, and you could put it on yourself fairly easy compared to other stuff. They did mention that they really discouraged using other stuff as tourniquets, like taking off a belt or using a piece of rope or that kind of thing, because they said most of them do more damage than the benefit.
Right, and that's
unless somebody actually like lost a limb or something. But
exactly, like if you're gonna die or not have the best tourniquet, then don't have the best tourniquet. But if you're prepping for everything, get a tourniquet that can be removed and not cause damage to the infrastructure underneath of it. So a SWAT is just another brand or whatever, and it came along whenever, and it's basically a giant rubber band. It is nothing more than a giant rubber band that's flat. Like, it's not a loop. It's not an actual band. It's just a giant flap of rubber. And I really, really, really like it for two reasons. Mostly, one is it's about the size of a pack of cigarettes. It's just a piece of rubber wrapped around itself, about the size of a pack of cigarettes. So it's substantial, yet it's completely just about bulletproof. It's just rubber. The worst you can do to it is get a bunch of holes in it, and it might not work. But for the most part, it's just rubber. So it's not much you can do to ruin it. And it's in a plastic bag, so that keeps it even nicer. And so it lasts a long time. And it's $12. And it's something you can definitely keep in a pocket, in an ankle holster, in your sock, in a tackle box, and it's cheap enough you could buy a bunch of them. And as you own one and it wears out, and you decide to buy a second one, even though you never used the first one, you start having multiples that you can keep around. And because it's a giant rubber band, it's not perfect. It's certainly not perfect, but it'll apply pressure to even a thigh on a man if you needed to. It's got enough rubber that it can do that. Not perfectly, but it can if necessary. Better than nothing. But on all the littler things, and that means my dog, and it means little kids, and it means smaller limbs on smaller people, it's really nice. Where the cat can do the important stuff, limbs on adult men, because we're all men, and the worst case scenario is what you got to build for. So an adult male's thigh is the worst thing you could look for on a tourniquet, and a cat can do it, period. That's confidently, a cat can do it. It's done it. It's big though, and it's not little. So a SWAT can be, I think, a great companion to a cat. And that being said, I'm not going to try to sell you tourniquets, but I will drop a link in here. But if it's something that intrigues you, definitely dig in. And I encourage you, if it is something that you're new to, or if you're apt to show interest, document your discovery of tourniquets or first aid or the Stop the Bleed, and then share that. This channel and everything I do is to impress upon us all that, our efforts are valuable. So whatever it is that you do, whoever it is that you reach, I'm hoping that we get a Second Amendment message out there. But in reality, the Stop the Bleed and the concept of making first aid approachable and understandable, that saves lives, like literally. And I don't care about guns at all. I'm talking car accidents and broken glass and falling downstairs or having a tree fall on you, things you don't get to choose, things that just happen in day-to-day life. People's lives get saved by having people next to them who don't freak out, or who at least understand the concepts. And even if it's the first time you've ever applied the concept, you can save a life with your two hands. And that's what better thing can we hope for, right? That's what we all want to have conversations like this about.
Right on, man. Lots of good information. Gee, I'm going to go ahead and call it a night, buddy, or a morning,
Yeah.
I guess I should say. But I'm going to go back and watch the rest of this discussion that you guys have, because this is good stuff, man. I do appreciate it.
We're going to end it. You said you could
Cool,
jump in for an hour. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, bud.
I'm just going to drop in that $10, what was that, a SWAT tourniquet, and then I'm going to drop in this $4 piece of H&H compressed gauze. It looks like you can buy this stuff for $1, depending on which pack you buy or whatever, and shipping and what. But H&H, a great company. This little compressed gauze is more like the size of a box of matches, and it is compressed 4 yards of gauze into probably about the size of a pack of matches. So I'll drop that one in there too. Those are both Amazon links. So if you bought that $4 thing from here, then guess what? We get 8 cents. So it's not a bunch, but keep that in mind. And if you do buy stuff online, go to somebody's site. Travis has site. Other people on gun channels that are creating content, they'll have sites out there that have links to these affiliates. Now here's $43. So that might be, what's 5% of 43? $2. So that's $2, and that accumulates. I don't really care if you use my links, because I don't get enough Amazon's really to really point people over there. But whenever I drop the links, I do drop them as affiliate links. In other words, that means that I grab them from up here, and Google, or Amazon in this case, has put a cookie in there. So that means when you use that link, a cookie will get created on your browser, and it'll give me credit for sending you there. Hiding here, I don't care if you use ours, but if you do buy stuff off Amazon, use somebody's. Anyway, buy some gauze, buy a tourniquet. Even if you don't use it, the other thing about first aid, and thanks again, Travis, for jumping in. I said
no problem, man. Yeah. No, it's all good, man. Yeah, no problem. I appreciate the invite as always, and it's always good to jump in.
Anyway, so grab some first aid stuff and use it. And if you don't, then you've got it there. If something happens and they're looking through your pockets to figure out who you are, oh, he's also got a tourniquet here. Why don't we use that on him? It's always that.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, when I put together my go bag and my my bug out bag for the house and my get back home bag for the car, I hate to say it, I went to the dollar store, because you can buy boxes of gauze at the dollar store for $1 a whack, and gauze is gauze. As long as it's sterile and it's in a package, in that case you're putting it in a in a carry bag, so you don't have to worry about the space as much. And, better to have it than not have it.
Heck yeah. I wouldn't be embarrassed about getting into a dollar store at all. That's what's called being pragmatic, right? Like you can get twice as much gauze, then you can make sure that pack, has every inch of gauze in it instead of just 2 packages of the fancy stuff. All right, well, that turned out to be a pretty interesting show, and I guess we have been running for just about an hour. So I think I kind of mentioned at the beginning here, I've been editing this video for 2 days, and I need to figure out how to edit faster, I guess, because I can't, there's no way I can go at this pace. But it should be an interesting video. I will be posting a video about some of the museums that, well, I guess Cycle's been to some of these. I'll screen share again and show everybody what I'm talking about. But I've been going to museums for a while, and as I get rid of, or as I retire from 2A advocacy, I want to start, presenting some of the stuff that I've accumulated. And I'm going to be doing a series on firearms museums, but a little bit different angle. I'm going to talk about them, of course. But one of the things that bugs me is every year they get together at one of the firearms museums. All the people that run these firearms museums will get together and bitch and moan and complain that nobody goes to the firearms museums ever. And I watched last year's. First, I didn't get invited, and I didn't do nothing about it. And then the second year, I didn't get invited, and I watched their videos because I didn't get invited. I want to see what they were talking about. So they're bitching and moaning that nobody goes to their museums. And in the process of bitching and moaning, they were talking about how there's not enough clubs anymore. And they came up with all these reasons why nobody goes to their museums, and it's not their fault, and it's everybody else's fault, and it's the internet's fault and everything. And I don't want our firearms museums to disappear. So I don't know who to talk to. So I said, well, why don't, I listened to this whining for like an hour, and I listened to it a second time, and I got all pissed. So I listened to it a third time, I think, and started writing notes. And I came up with this big long email of bitching where I'm like, here's why you should shut up, and here's what you can do about it. But I didn't know who to send that to. So I sent it to the person that posted the video, and then I sent it to another person I know. Both of those people got invited to this meeting I had been invited to. And then I sent it to them, and they basically did nothing, and nothing's happened. So I said, all right, well, instead of doing nothing with all this, I'm going to go ahead and just present it to my YouTube audience as, since I'm no longer going to be an advocate, here's the kind of the shit that made me not be an advocate anymore. So, yeah, I got frustrated. I think they should have a passport. One of the ideas I have is that they should have a passport system, and as you go to the different firearms museums, you should get a stamp, and then you could have a reason tangibly to go to these museums and create commotion and talk about how I went to the museum. I got my stamp. Somebody that travels for a living or for a hobby, would have a thing to accomplish. And I don't think it costs that much. It would just take a little bit of participation, and they can do it. But again, I don't know who to bring that to, so I'm just going to bring it to the world. So one of the ways I'm going to do that is by talking about the museums I've been to and kind of use my concept of a U.S. firearms museum passport, 2A for USA, and I'll just make up my own little thing. So the first video here was to explain all that and kind of intro the concept. And this has taken me 2 fucking days of editing. It's taken me forever. So I'm nowhere near. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them kind of in place. But there's still a lot to do here, so I don't even know how long this has taken me. So, but that's why I'm jumping off. I'm going to go do that some more and say thanks to Cycle for staying up really late. If it's late for me, it's doubly late for you. Appreciate you jumping in. I saw some people out there. Crump was out there earlier. Devin said he wanted to link, but then he didn't jump in. So I don't know if he was listening. Pink's out there right now. DTP comments and Pete are out there right now. And then thanks to Travis for jumping in from Nebraska. But with that, Cycle, you got anything you want to plug on the way up?
Yeah, I just want to mention that, you were talking about, passports and stuff. And, I as you're aware, I got into the ham radio hobby in 2017. And one of the interesting things that they have is they actually have like little awards that if you cover a certain number of counties around the United States or a certain portion of the United States, you can earn an award. And that kind of fits into that same idea is, you get a little, just a little recognition of, hey, you went to the extra effort of doing this or doing that. And, depending on what motor radio you used or that kind of deal. So that kind of thing might be an interesting thing as well. You know that in addition to having the passport, because I remember the wine passport. That was a lot of fun. We do that here in Connecticut. We have a wine passport, and if you get, I think it's 12 or 16 vineyards in a year, you can submit your passport, and the like there's like a grand prize of a trip to Italy, and that was pretty slick. So those are the kind of things that might get people interested in stuff like that, where if they if that makes them eligible for a chance at maybe a trip to the NRA museum or that kind of thing might be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Thanks. Because I didn't even think of that one. My ideas were more aligned because they griped for like an hour. They had a whole bunch of little gripes, so I was like giving them one response to each gripe. So I didn't even come up with that. That's an excellent idea, and that can be accomplished with a circle with, you add chevrons around the outside, or like a border that increases, or rank. There's a lot of ways you could play with that, or even once they get to a different level, they get to get a different passport stamp, and that wouldn't cost much more than having a couple of different levels of stamp.
Well, sure, or earn a discount. Once you've been to 5 museums that are participating in whatever this is, you get $1 off. If there happens to be an entry fee, that kind of thing.
And I wasn't even thinking about it. As you said that, it made me think of when my grandpa was super excited when he got old enough to, whenever the day was when they had I think they still have the old people.
Oh, that golden thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And let people buy the passport for a discount period. Yeah. And then as you get stamps, your discount increases, or maybe it costs less for you to renew your passport. But yeah, there's so many ways that they could play with that. But the other stuff that, since we're kind of chatting, is, they were complaining that the internet. And I'm like, well, then go online. Like, what are you not bringing somebody online for a reason? Like, I'm over here trying to fundraise to bring a 360 camera because there's no 360 cameras of your museums. It costs $300 to get a 360 camera. Buy one, put 360s up of your museum, and don't be dependent on people walking in the door. And the internet isn't a disadvantage; it's an advantage. You could be the most known museum, period, because you're online. Like, that was one of them. They were complaining about there's no collectors groups, and I'm like, you own the stuff that collectors groups are aware of and want to be near. What if you let the collectors groups in? Most of these museums have a meeting room. What if you had the meetings there? Or what if the yearly meetings were there? Or like the Connecticut Cult Club could go to Woolly Rock and have, they'll open the windows and let you look at stuff. And each year, they open up a different section of the thing, and there's an incentive to stay in the club, and you get to touch the stuff like that. Like, don't think of that as a disadvantage. Your clubs should be the people supporting you. It should be your biggest advocates.
Well, look at the here in Connecticut, we have the what do you call it? The aquarium, right? Mystic Marine Life Aquarium. And one of the advantages of being a member of the aquarium was they had special member things where they did behind the scenes tours. And they also had things where they did overnights, like for the kids and families. Mm-hmm. And that was really cool. I mean, my daughter and I participated in that when she was younger. And a museum could do the same kind of thing, have an overnight for the scouts, or have a behind the scenes tour of how do you curate this stuff. And you do it on off hours. Obviously, you don't do it while the museum's open and you need your staff to be watching the museum. But there's all kinds of stuff you can do to try to bring people in and get them more involved. And as far as like you said, the internet stuff, if you go to the trouble of making internet content, you get to advertise during that content and say, hey, throw us $1. So it's not a question of, well, they're going to watch the video and then they won't show up. It's not a question of do they show up. The question is, do they support you?
Yeah. The question is, do they value what you got, and are you presenting it in a way that there is something to value? And yeah, like you just brought up something I wasn't even thinking about, but like you were saying, allowing the individual who views it, who appreciates it, to drop $1 into like a Patreon or a PayPal or whatever, like a thank you jar. I was thinking it opens it up to let industry say, oh, yeah, we care about this. So, like, Dr. Pepper might want to see a Texas museum exist and throw a couple of bucks at it as a supporting patron or something. But yeah, I didn't even think about the individuals. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's. You were right. The whole problem with the museum is they're all dependent on the people have to be here so we can ding them for a buck at the door. And
Yeah.
my thing is, when you're on the internet, you've got that electronic door everywhere.
Well, that's what I was kind of thinking. Is that since you have the stuff, like you're going to wait around for the internet superhero to come around and show off your stuff, or why don't you just show off your stuff? So now your presence online becomes a destination for anybody interested in this. And that's where I was thinking, yeah, now you just throw like an ad for Pepsi or somebody who's cares, and there's a fine relationship right there. But yeah, if you had a thing on there that said, hey, you liked this, and here we gave you great access, and you have a virtual accessibility to it, give us $2. It's just like PBS or saying thank you, or like you say, like a virtual admission to the museum.
Yep.
But yeah, so anyways, this is my series I'm working on. I thought I could whip this out. I was sick over the weekend. I planned on doing it over the weekend and having it whipped out so that I could get the first couple in before shot. This ended up taking forever. I'm gonna probably stop because I didn't get enough accomplished today to want to finish it. So I will leave it for a bit and start digging into tomorrow, since I need to raise funds for the trip to Vegas. I haven't even paid off the what do you call the credit card going to that stupid rally.
Yeah. When is shot?
The 20th that week. So
Okay, so you got a little bit of time.
Week after next, yeah.
Yeah, another 10, 12 days.
So was hoping to get some stuff done. I've got some stuff that came out of the robot, but the robot doesn't come out perfect. It comes out done-ish. So I have to finish it, and that means pulling some stuff out and finishing these things. So I'll have the first couple of stuff that came out of the robot available, and I was hoping to work on it. Anyway, I didn't. So I'm going to try to work on that a bit for tomorrow. And I have a big Free Patch Friday thing going on tomorrow. So anybody who's interested, check out the Gear website store. Stay tuned on, I guess, the YouTubes and the Gun Streamers and such on channels for stuff coming up about that. And thanks again, Cycle, for jumping in. It was a great show again tonight. It's been, so far, every show this year, I think, has been pretty decent. And let us know in the comments what you think. And to the people that showed up tonight, thanks for watching. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Take a stop to bleed cars.
Definitely.